Welcome to episode 9 in our series on Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto's The Path of the Just. And we are now up to chapter 8. And the chapter header for this episode is Acquiring Alacrity. How can we acquire this attribute? And Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto is going to describe how similar the concept relates to what he's mentioned previously in the previous episode regarding vigilance. They're very closely related according to the Ramchal, and he's going to describe how exactly. So the Ramchal begins. The means for acquiring alacrity are the self-same ones for acquiring vigilance, and their progressive levels are the same as well, as I have written before. This is because their functions are very closely related. The only difference is that the former, he's referring to alacrity or vigor, the former concerns the positive commandments, and the latter, referring to vigilance, the negative commandments. So the Ramchal is trying to equate the two attributes, but he's trying to apply them differently. So you must acquire vigilance against the negative, against sins, and you must acquire or apply alacrity or vigor to your positive deeds. And the Ramchal continues. When a person discovers the full value of the mitzvot and the extent of his obligations regarding them, his heart will certainly be inspired towards the service of the Eternal and will not retract from it. We say, however, invigorate this awakening by observing all the good that the Holy One, blessed be He, does for man at every moment, and the great wonders that He does for him from the time of birth until the day he dies. The more one observes and contemplates these matters, the more he will recognize his great debt to his benefactor God. And this in turn will become the means that will safeguard him from becoming indolent and lax in his service of God. Although he certainly cannot repay him for his goodness, he will begin to realize that he should at least extol his name and fulfill his mitzvot. There isn't a person, no matter what his circumstances, poor or rich, healthy or sick, who does not perceive numerous wonders and acts of benevolence in his situation. A wealthy person or a healthy individual is already indebted to the Blessed One for his wealth or his good health. A poor person is also indebted to God, for even in his poverty he is sustained by the Eternal, miraculously and wondrously, and he does not allow him to die of hunger. And similarly a sick person, for he strengthens him during his relentless sickness and suffering, and does not allow him to descend to the grave. And it is the same with anything of a similar nature, which means that there is not a single person who will fail to recognize his indebtedness to his Creator. And when he observes the benevolence that the Eternal has bestowed on him, he will surely be inspired to alacrity in his service of the Eternal, as I have written previously, and that all the goodness that he receives is dependent on the Blessed One's hands. Whatever he needs and whatever is essential is from the Blessed One, and from no other. And therefore he surely will not be able to afford being indolent or lazy in the service of God, so as not to find himself deprived of what is vital to him. You can see that I have incorporated in my words here the 3 progressive levels that I have categorized with reference to the virtue of vigilance, which was in a previous episode. For they, vigilance and alacrity, are one and the same in this respect, and either one can be derived from the context of the other. Those who are truly wise will be motivated by their sense of duty and by their cognizance of the value and significance of their deeds. Those of lesser aptitude will be motivated by awareness of the world to come and the honor that abounds there. they should not have to face the shameful realization that they had forfeited all the good that could have been theirs. As for the masses, they will be motivated by the realities of this world and its requirements, as I have explained previously. And I think I'm going to move on to chapter 9 now, which deals with factors that undermine alacrity and how to avoid them. This is good, a masterclass in teaching us how to avoid falling into the traps of laziness and making excuses. And this teaches us the pitfalls that all of us encounter at some point in our lives and how we can remedy these bad attitudes. So, chapter 9, factors that undermine alacrity and how to avoid them. The Ramchal begins. The factors that lead to the loss of alacrity are those that reinforce indolence. The greatest of these is the desire for physical ease, the detestation of any exertion, and the unlimited pursuit of pleasure. An individual of this nature will find that serving his Creator is a great burden. One who would like to eat all his meals in complete repose and relaxation, who wants to sleep without any disturbances, who refuses to walk other than at a leisurely pace, etc., will find it very difficult to get up in the morning for shul, or to hurry through his meal in order to daven mincha before dusk, or to go out to perform a mitzvah if the weather isn't agreeable. So you can imagine how much more reluctant he will be to rush off to do a mitzvah or to learn Torah. So this is very true. The Ramchal describing a really lazy person, someone who doesn't have the fire in his belly to serve God or to be a good human being, and does everything at a leisurely pace. And if you request of him to do something, everything is a burden to do. And anyway, the Ramchal continues. One who habituates himself to these patterns of behavior will not have the requisite mastery over himself to do the opposite when he so desires, for his will has already been imprisoned by his own habits, which have become second nature to him. A person must realize that he is not in this world in order to rest. Rather, he must be prepared to toil and exert himself. He must conduct himself like wage workers behave around their employers, which recalls the following statement from Eruvin 65a, we are like day workers. And he must also conduct himself like soldiers at their battle posts, who eat quickly, whose sleep is irregular, and who are always ready for combat. Referring to this, Scripture states, and he quotes from Job 5 verse 7, for man is born to labour. So this is very true. We really do have to, if we really want to be effective servants of God, we have to treat this world like we're in an army, like we're in God's army, and we're like soldiers that eat when they can, sleep when they can, and are ready for battle at any time. It shouldn't, our lives shouldn't center around our rest time and our eating time and our recreational time. We should be prepared, we should understand that our lives have changed and that we actually have a mission, and this mission is like a soldier's mission. And once you get used to that lifestyle, it actually becomes the preferred way of being. Lions are not appealing anymore, or just being indolent in various ways. So, and now the Ramchal continues. When one accustoms himself in this manner, he will definitely find it easier to serve the Eternal, since he will lack neither the willingness nor the necessary preparations for this. In a similar vein, our sages of blessed memory said, and he quotes from Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 6, verse 4, this is the way of the Torah. Eat bread with salt, ration your drinking of water, and sleep on the ground. This is the recommended formula for this total safeguarding of oneself from comforts and pleasure. So this is a very famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, chapter 6, Mishnah 4. But I have a slant on this. It says, this is the way of the Torah. Eat bread with salt. You could compare that to bread being the Torah and salt perhaps being the oral law, a commentary. So when you put salt on bread, it emphasizes, or it complements very well the bread and brings out various flavors. Ration your drinking of water. We're told that the Torah is like water. We're also told to fix time for your learning of Torah. So you ration your drinking of water, you fix it, you measure it, and you apportion it at the right time. Also, sleeping on the ground. We're taught that the students of olden times used to take their lessons on the floor. They used to sit in the dust on the ground in front of their teachers. And this is a good analogy, sleep on the ground. In other words, be prepared to sleep in your classroom, so to speak. Be so committed that you happily grab a few minutes sleep in order to continue your studying. That could be another slant on this Pirkei Avos Mishnah. And now the Ramchal describes another enemy of yourself, which is your indolence or your laziness regarding natural weather conditions and why and how one makes excuses not to do things because of these natural occurrences. And he continues, another factor that can lead to the loss of alacrity is excessive fear and dread on the transient and its various manifestations. On one occasion, a person may dread the cold or the heat. On another, accidents or illnesses or the wind, and so on and so forth. This is what King Solomon referred to when he said in Proverbs 26 verse 13, thus said the indolent, a lion is on the road, a lion lies in wait in the streets. So he refers to a person not committing himself to perhaps go to his base or Midrash or his school because he fears that a lion may be waiting in the streets, which is probably a manifestation of fear or laziness. And Ramchal continues, the sages of blessed memory have criticized this characteristic of fear and associated it with those who sin. A verse in scripture supports this idea, declaring, and he quotes from Yeshayahu 33 verse 14, the sinners in Zion were afraid, the wicked were gripped with trembling. Fear is associated with those who sin, to such an extent that one of the great sages, upon seeing that his disciple was filled with fear, said, you are a sinner. That's from Brachot 60a. However, with reference to this, it has been stated in Psalms 37 verse 3, trust in the eternal and do good, then you shall dwell in the land and be sustained by your faith. In summation, a person must place himself on a temporary footing in this world and a permanent one in relation to his service of the eternal. With worldly matters, he must be content and satisfied with whatever he happens to find. He must take from what comes his way, shun ease and be prepared to work and toil, and his heart should be secure in its trust in the eternal, without fear of the consequences that time and its afflictions may bring. But the Ramchal brings an interesting question. Have we not been commanded to protect ourselves from danger and look after ourselves? And the Ramchal continues to ask this question. But you may object. And he quotes, we find that the sages required one to protect his family carefully, or protect himself carefully, wherever he is, and not place himself in danger, even if he is a tzaddik and a man of deeds. And they said, and he quotes from Kesuvos 30a, everything is in the hands of heaven except illnesses that result from the cold and from the heat. And it is clearly written in Deuteronomy 4 verse 15, you shall be very careful of yourselves. So we see that one cannot decide to have trust in the eternal in all circumstances, as it further states, even for a mitzvah, one must be careful not to endanger himself. This is from Pesachim 8b. So we have learned that we have to watch out for reasonable dangers. And the Ramchal continues, one has to distinguish between the different kinds of fear. There is fear that is appropriate and fear that is irrational. There is trusting in the eternal, and there is recklessness. For the Master, blessed be He, created man with an intelligent mind and the ability to reason, so that he would be able to conduct himself properly and safeguard himself from the noxious phenomena that have been created to punish evildoers. One who chooses to ignore wisdom and is willing to place himself in danger is not displaying trust but rather recklessness. Such a person is sinning by flouting the will of the Creator, who wants man to protect himself. Therefore, besides the inherent danger that he is liable to bring upon himself due to his carelessness, he is also directly at fault by sinning against God's will. Consequently, the sin itself brings on his punishment. By contrast, it is the precautionary fear that we mentioned above, grounded in knowledge and intelligence, that is appropriate, about which is said, and he quotes from King Solomon's Proverbs, chapter 22, verse 3, "The wise man sees the evil and hides, and the foolish pass through it and are punished." Irrational fear, however, is characterized by a person's tendency to be overly self-protective and overly fearful. His protective measures are so elaborate that they lead to the neglect of Torah study, of the divine service. So the Ramchal is referring to phantom menaces that appear in one's mind that are almost real to us, but in fact they are not real, and they're just imaginary. And they can sometimes stop us from doing a lot of things in life. We talk about physical dangers or weather patterns that stop us from doing certain things. When we understand that sometimes blockages in our mental health can restrict our desire to do anything, and they're as real as anything physical. So the Ramchal is urging us to ignore these tugs of our mind that pretend that something exists that actually is not real, and stops us from doing what we should be doing. And the Ramchal continues, the criterion for differentiating between these two types of fear is the distinction that the sages of blessed memory made when they said, and he quotes from Pesachim 8b, "Where there is a likelihood of one coming to harm, it is different, i.e., where it is likely and evident that one will come to harm, then one must take precautions. But where this is not evident, one need not fear." Along the same lines it was stated in Chulin 56b, "We do not presume the existence of a blemish that we cannot see, and a sage can only rely on what his eyes can see." That's from Bava Basra 131a. This is what is meant by the verse we cited previously from Proverbs chapter 22:3. "The wise man sees the evil and hides." This can only be referring to hiding from the evil that one perceives, not from something that perhaps might possibly happen. And this is precisely the intent of the verse I have mentioned previously. "Thus said the indolent, a lion is on the road, a lion lies in wait in the street." That's from Proverbs 26:3. So these imaginary dangers that really are not there, we shouldn't be held hostage by them, and we shouldn't let them rule our lives. But it's a fact that they do at some time. At some point, everybody goes through that, where an imaginary fear stops them from doing something that they want to do. But the Ramchal is going to describe how sometimes it's really not, it's down to what we want to do. Perhaps these fears come from somewhere else. Do they come from laziness? Are they produced by our indolence? This is what the Ramchal will discuss now. The sages of blessed memory aptly explain this idea to demonstrate just how effective baseless fear can be in deterring one from doing a good deed. They said in Devarim Rabbah 8 verse 6, Shlomo said 7 things about an indolent person as follows. People would say to the lazy person, "Your teacher is in town, go and learn Torah from him." And he would respond to them, "I'm afraid of the lion in the road." If they said to him, "Your teacher is in the community," he would say, "I'm afraid there might be a lion in the streets." When they would say to him, "He's within your house," he would say to them, "If I go to him, I will find the door locked." They would say to him, "It's open, the door's open." And when he no longer knew what to answer, he would say to them, "It doesn't matter whether the door is unlocked or locked. I would like to sleep a little more." From here we see that it is not fear that leads one to indolence. Rather, it is indolence that causes one to fear. In regards to all of these matters, daily experience and common knowledge will attest to the fact that, and he quotes from Psalms 49 verse 14, "This is their way, their folly remains with them." One who reflects upon this will discover its penetrating truth, and it will be readily acknowledged by the intelligent mind. This topic of alacrity or vigour has already been explained in a manner that I consider sufficient to arouse the heart. The wise person, however, will grow wiser, further adding to his wisdom. You will now realize why vigour or alacrity is placed a step above vigilance. As a general rule, a person cannot attain alacrity unless he first attains vigilance. A person who is not meticulously careful in what he does and does not delve into the divine service and its guidelines, which constitute the virtue of vigilance, as I have written, will find it difficult to display love and yearning for that service and to rush with fervour before his Creator. For such an individual is still drowning in physical desires, and he maintains the pursuit of his habits, which only serves to distance him further from all of this. However, once he becomes aware of his deeds and is vigilant about them and assesses the mitzvot and the transgressions that he does, as we have mentioned, it will be easier for him to turn away from evil and to desire good, and he will do it with alacrity. This is self-evidence. And that concludes chapter 9 and chapter 8 of this section. And so the conclusion to that is that really, first of all, we have to master vigilance before vigour. But once we master vigilance, the vigour will come more naturally. I say from personal experience that vigilance in terms of discipline, I found that, I've mentioned this before in other episodes, how discipline in your life, making sure you wake up early in the morning, perhaps taking on maybe some dietary restrictions to keep yourself more healthy, anything that is a kind of puts the brakes on in some way, adds to the fire in your belly, in your kind of vigour. I've noticed that personally, that when I commit myself to wake up early, even though I used to find waking up quite difficult, now I don't feel any tiredness whatsoever if I wake up extremely early. Also with my diet, I tried to restrict sometimes my diet in some ways, and I found that it would help when I wanted to adopt new disciplines. They would be much more easily integrated into my daily life. And I felt that through this kind of discipline or vigilance, actually, instead of detracting from me, it added vigour to my life and my activities. So this is very, very true. And in the next episode, chapter 10, we're going to move on to the next rung of this ladder, this metaphysical ladder, and we're going to deal with the virtue of cleanliness. Or rather ridding yourself of any bad traits and all sin. And that's going to be a fascinating subject.